Hello everyone, it's the Embark Avenue, I am Eric, and today I'm talking about the most underrated roller coaster at every Six Flags park. We'll jump in. One note is that for some of these I will have honorable mentions, because there are a few parks that have multiple underrated coasters, and also make sure you subscribe to the channel so you know when new theme park content comes out. I do rankings, reviews, and a whole lot more. Let's begin. Starting with everyone's favorite, Six Flags Magic Mountain. This one I would say does not really have a ton of underrated coasters per se, but it does have a clone of one of the most underrated coasters in the entire chain, Batman the Ride. The Batman the Ride inverts are awesome, and very few people seem to think that. I find them intense, the layouts are excellent, and there's very little I dislike. I can't really think of a whole lot to improve them, even though they are smaller scale inverts, and they're not the best inverts by any means, but I think they deserve a lot more credit. Honorable mention goes to Twisted Colossus, because it's kind of considered like a lower tier RMC now, but I think it is the best non-hyper RMC that I've ridden. And that is saying quite a bit. It's a near perfect roller coaster for me, and I think it's among the best out there. Now for Six Flags Great Adventure. This one's easily going to King Ka. Not a whole lot to say, because I talked about it before a lot, but the launch is insanely powerful, the ride is not rough, the restraints do not bother me, and it's an adrenaline rush. Honorable mention to the Superman Ultimate Flight and Batman the Ride clones at Great Adventure. I mentioned Batman already. And Superman Ultimate Flight, the flying coaster, awesome ride. I'll talk about it more later. Now for my personal favorite Six Flags park, Six Flags Great America. And I enjoy this one a lot because it has underrated coasters. Everything from Raging Bull, to American Eagle, to Batman the Ride, to Superman Ultimate Flight. However, X-Flight is the main one here. X-Flight is insanely underrated. I see many put it barely in the top 10 at the park, some prefer Whizzer and such, even those who don't have a ton of emotional attachment to Whizzer. But X-Flight is an awesome ride. I don't dislike anything about it with the exception of a little bit of bumpiness in the final part in select seats. But this wing coaster is hard to beat. You have an excellent first drop, top tier inversions, insane pacing and intensity, especially for a wing coaster, and the finale is stronger than that of Gatekeeper. I think the theming and near-miss elements are also quite strong, and I enjoy the ride thoroughly. It's in my top 3 at the park, and it's a pretty hard one to beat in general, and as far as wing coasters go, B&M coasters, Six Flags coasters, it's among the very best, so I'd say underrated. Now Six Flags St. Louis, one that I thought was very interesting because not a lot of overrated stuff, but not a lot of underrated stuff either. The most underrated, however, is Ninja. Mainly because people really trash on Ninja. However, I found it was a good ride. Not anything outstanding, but honestly among the better aero loopers out there. The main thing that does take away is that certain parts are bumpy, like with most arrows, and it's mainly the more meandering portions, but the inversions are great. And one thing, I don't know if it's intentional, the cable for the lift hill kind of hangs really low, and it feels like a head chopper element on the ride, and it's quite a fun experience. I prefer it to quite a few people's favorite roller coaster at the park, and I'm not going to say what that is, because I've trashed on it quite enough. Screaming Eagle. Anyway, let's move on. Fiesta, Texas. Six Flags Fiesta, Texas does not have a lot of underrated stuff. It does have a lot of closed stuff that I can't judge, but Batman the Ride, the 40 free spin, is my choice. In general, I enjoy the 40 free spin more than the average person. Some hate them. I like them quite a bit, and this is among my favorites. From the great queue, to the better flips, and the overall smoother experience, despite the fact that the ride is the oldest one. The only minor flaw is at the very end of the ride, once you're on the brake run and such. That's when you can feel the entire structure shake, and it's not the most reassuring thing. But yeah, I still like it a lot. Six Flags America in the DC area. The most underrated for sure is Batwing. Some individuals do not enjoy this one at all. However, I cannot fault it in basically any regard. It is smooth, it has excellent elements such as the very intense Vekoma loop, and the helix that takes you insanely close to the ground at the end. The ride is fairly long, it is well paced, the restraints do not really hurt, and there isn't really anything that I dislike about it. It's not necessarily an amazing roller coaster, but it's the best ride at Six Flags America, and one that I definitely recommend. As far as the Flying Dutchman coasters go, this is probably the best. Six Flags Over Georgia. This one has a couple underrated ones. I mentioned Batman the Ride before, but this Batman the Ride gets a lot of credit, so I'll go with Superman Ultimate Flight as my choice. The original Superman flying coaster, it is excellent. Some definitely don't like it, but for me, it is the number 3 ride in the park. Call me crazy, but the pretzel loop is among the best inversions, period. The terrain is phenomenally used. The ride feels long, it's a great combination of intense and graceful. The final inversion is good. And while yes, I agree with most that one less turn and one more intense element would have done well for the ride, I love it the way it is, and it's definitely among my favorites. Honorable mention, Daredevil Dive. The best Gerstlauer I've been on by far. Everything about it's great, apart from the somewhat slow pacing of the second half. Now for La Ronde. La Ronde is among the most underrated parks in the Six Flags chain for me. That said, it's not because of the roller coasters. The one I will be giving the underrated award to, though, is Le Monstre, or Le Monster for some. Now, even though this one was deemed the best roller coaster in Six Flags by a 2009 poll from a very reliable source, it's not really well liked. So crazy, right? But no, it's not that crazy. This ride can be a little rough. But only one moment really bothered me, and the rest had decent drops and was a large, fun roller coaster, gave a long, enjoyable experience, and while it's definitely not amazing, it's the worst roller coaster I've talked about so far, except for Screaming Eagle if that counts, but I love going on this one. It's not an amazing roller coaster, but it is a fun one. Honorable mention goes to Goliath because that's actually an awesome ride and it's among the best roller coasters probably ever. It's definitely a top 50 roller coaster, and no one really talks about it. Now for Six Flags New England. It's hard to pick an underrated one here because there's only 2 great rides. And I feel like all of the bad ones, things like Flashback, those get the hate they deserve. So I'm going to go with Superman the Ride, I guess. There are some who are like me, that consider this the best of traditional hypers and one of the best intimate roller coasters, and in fact, probably a top 10 roller coaster in the world. But I know plenty who think the restraints ruin the ride, and for me, that just is not the case. Yes, they are painful, but during the ride, I thought about that very little, and I thought only on the final brake run was it a little bad. But I love everything about the ride, it's a near perfect layout, and definitely the most underrated at the park, even though it's not really that underrated. Now Six Flags Discovery Kingdom has the opposite issue. Any of the major roller coasters that are not Vekoma could be considered underrated. But I'm going with Joker. Joker is often considered the worst RMC. However, I think it is one of the better ones. As crazy as it sounds, I prefer Joker to a list of the following. You may want to skip a good 10-20 seconds from now if you don't like bad opinions. These include Wicked Cyclone, Outlaw Run, Goliath at Six Flags Great America, Jersey Devil, and New Texas Giants. Whew. Anyway, I think Joker has some of the best inversions, perfect pacing, a great length, and so much to enjoy. Definitely underrated. Now for The Great Escape, the worst of Six Flags parks. And I'm gonna go with Comet, I guess? It's not really that underrated. Most people give it the credit it deserves, but it's definitely not talked about that much. I can't give it to anything else though. There's not a single other good roller coaster I went on at Great Escape, so we're just gonna leave it at that. Moving on, Darien Lake is next, and I will be going with Predator for this one. Some people definitely give Predator what it deserves. Praise. I think some dislike it, and that's fine. But for me, it is an awesome wooden coaster. Rough perhaps, but painful it is not. It has excellent airtime moments, and holds its speed insanely well. The Titan track is admittedly jarring, but I think it does help to an extent, and I very much enjoy it. So I will give an honorable mention to Tantrum, another great Gerstlauer, only hindered by length, otherwise an excellent ride. Now for Frontier City, and there's not really a roller coaster here that people talk about and say is bad, They're all just fine roller coasters, really. And the main two were closed for me anyway when I went. So I'm just gonna go with Frankie's Mine Train. It's one of the best kiddie coasters. Moving on. Over Texas. Six Flags Over Texas has so many underrated ones to choose from. It could be New Texas Giant. It could be Runaway Mine Train, Mr. Freeze, Joker, but I'm going to go with Runaway Mountain. Runaway Mountain is an awesome ride. It is top 5 in the park for me. The drop, the twisted one, you know what I'm talking about if you've been on it, has no right to be as good as it is. The ride is long, the darkness adds so much, its speed is great, and as far as Premier Rides coasters go, I might actually say it's one of the better ones. Some consider it a family coaster. I don't know if I think it's a family coaster. It might be too crazy for some family members to handle. I think it is a phenomenal ride, and it's a better than most roller coasters in the park. I take it over even Shockwave. It's underrated. And that is all the parks I've been to. I mentioned I've not been to Mexico. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below which Six Flags roller coasters you consider underrated. Subscribe for more content. I'll see you next time.